for being here. We are very excited to dive in and talk about applying to top MBA programs as a consultant. This is obviously a lot of people that apply to MBA programs from a consulting background. And so we're excited to kind of talk through some of the unique strategies that you should think through and get to know you a little bit. I know this is many of you, I see some familiar faces. Many of you are already working with coaches on Leland or have been going to past events. Others of you are probably here for the first time wondering what Leland is. So excited to tell you a little bit more about us and spend the time hearing from experts on our panel. So you're in the right place. I know this is exactly what all of you want to be doing on your Wednesday evenings, is talking about MBAs. But that's what it takes to get in, and so we're gonna do that, and we're here to help you. Make sure you sign up. Erica dropped the link in the chat if you haven't signed up. Want to make sure you're looped in on future events that we host and a bunch of other resources, and then we're also going to drop some links that are helpful to click on if you are signed up during this call. So check that out. We'll send these coach profiles and other things. Any just logistical questions, we'll get those out of the way. If you have questions throughout the discussion, feel free to drop those in the chat. Our coaches will try to monitor it. We obviously are going to be talking a lot, and sometimes I'll pull those into the conversation, but we'll also try to monitor that as much as we can. If you stay on till the end, we'll do some discounts and some other things to I guess reward the people that hang out with us tonight. And then make sure you sign up so that we can get you that recording. All right, let's jump into the event. I will introduce myself. I'm John, CEO of Leland. I applied to business school about 8 years ago, seven or 8 years ago. Graduated from Stanford GSB, was admitted to HBS. Actually worked with Andy on my applications back in the day, who's one of our panelists tonight, which is kind of a fun full circle moment. You'll also see Josh, Izzy, Erica, Amelia, and other Leland team members in the chat answering questions, helping out. So big thank you to them for all the coordination. And big thanks to a lot of our consulting firm partners that sent this out to many of you. One note on that, we do have some partnerships with certain consulting firms. So if you aren't sure about your specific firm, you can send me an email or Erica an email, and we can kind of send you the right link. And if not, we can kind of help get that set up. So I'll drop my email in the chat, and then feel free to. It's just john@joinleland.com, but I'll drop it in the chat as well. And big thanks to those partners. With that, I'm going to kick it over to our panelists to do their own introductions. We'll start with you, Andy, and then go to Geri, and then Ben to bring it home.
Okay, sounds great. So thanks everybody for coming. Really happy to be here. I've been doing this for about 20 years. Grew up in the Northeast. Went to college at Stanford, West Coast. Lived there for a while. Have a little bit of a different background. Have a business background, marketing. Also worked for a few years in Hollywood. Did some screenwriting stuff. No Oscars. Nothing too dramatic. But I worked on a few projects that didn't get made. And I realized that I like combining like marketing strategy and storytelling. And I kind of got into this organically, kind of that way. And I found that I really like helping people uncover this authentic, unmistakably true, resonant story that a lot of times helps them kind of discover something about themselves and helps them realize like how incredibly great they are and how much they value they'll really be able to add in such high-powered MBA environments. So that's what I really enjoy, and looking forward to talking more about how we can all help you guys apply.
Hi, everybody. I'm Geri. Thanks so much for being here, everybody. I also grew up in the Northeast, and I worked for many years at Harvard Business School, and 8 of those years I worked in the MBA admissions office. So that's kind of why I'm here today. And I think my sort of goal with all of this when I started coaching is just to try and take what I learned on that side of the house, working for one of those top programs, and I kind of saw all the people that would come forward to some of these events that we would be at, some panels, and there was so much anxiety and so many, questions and so much that seemed sort of behind the scenes that they didn't know about, that I wanted to be able to kind of use that knowledge that I have from being on that side of the house kind of over here and really help people who, have great stories and help bring those stories out and help reduce that anxiety and share what I can about sort of what's happening on the other side of the house, so that folks can kind of really pull together the best possible application that they can. And I love doing this. And, I end up kind of working with a ton of consulting clients as well as folks from, elsewhere. But I'd say about my clientele group ends up being about a third to a half coming from consulting. So, have lots of good experience on that front. And, thanks again for being here tonight.
Awesome. Hey, everybody. My name is Ben. I'm from Queens, New York. Went to WashU for undergrad, so shout out any Bears in chat. But went to McKinsey after WashU, and then spent a year and change at the Chicago Mayor's office before I went to Stanford for an MBA. Super excited to help people think about this, because I personally had no idea what I was getting into when I was doing consulting. I actually didn't even know what it meant until I probably was 6 months into the job. I was like, oh, I think I have some general grasp now of what the job is. But I think there was definitely a thought process around how long should I stay? What's the actual life cycle of my time here? And then I think kind of following your passion and trying to help other folks now figure out what that passion is as they start from that consulting baseline. I think it's an interesting question, and I know what it's like having gone through it, and I know a lot of people struggle to stand out or realizing how they can stand out, and so I think that's a huge part of what I help folks with, as well as Andy and Geri too.
That's great. This is an awesome panel. I'm very, very excited. So we obviously collect a lot of data. We have almost 1,000 coaches on Leland. These are 3 of the best. They are going to fill up, so definitely reach out to them. I've seen a couple intro calls trickle through for most of them. So definitely you can reach out to them. Erica dropped their profiles in the chat. Definitely encourage you to get on their radar early because they will fill up. So we also love to get to know you. I know that many of you are maybe on the go, don't have cameras on. That's okay. But if you could drop in the chat where you're at, where you're dialing in from. It's always fun to see people that are international and folks in the US. And when you will be applying, if you're applying this fall or applying a few years down the road. Some of you maybe even applying now as a deferred candidate. But yeah, would love to hear here in the chat. London starting us off strong. Geri just told us she got back from London recently, which is fun. Sydney. All right. We got multiple Sydney. Great. Dubai. Wow, we're all over the place. Don't be ashamed if you're in little old California or Utah or New York or wherever. The Denver airport. People dialing in on the road. Great. This year. Awesome. Yeah. So it looks like a lot of people that are applying this year or next year. That's great. You're getting started early. Lots of things to think about. We'll let that kind of trickle in and keep moving. So just to kind of give you a quick overview of what Leland is, we're building the one-stop shop to help people break into the most competitive schools and companies in the world. We do that through connecting you with experts like the folks on this call, primarily through one-on-one coaching, but we also do lots of free community events like this. We also have an amazing content library called Leland Plus, and we also do classes and courses as well. So lots of different things to help you reach your goals in an affordable and effective way. So we're very excited about what we're building and the progress that we've seen. We've helped tens of thousands of people as they've navigated competitive processes. MBA is our biggest category. We do we're definitely the largest in terms of how many people we reach and help every year. And we obviously specialize in the best schools in the world. So and these coaches would say the same. So that's a little bit about us. We're excited to get to know you and happy to answer any questions about Leland. Some of you may not know what coaching is. I certainly did not. When I met Andy, I'd never used an admissions consultant. I had a friend that asked me, who was at Stanford, who said, who's going to be your coach? And I was like, what does that even mean? I didn't even know that was a thing when I didn't use one when I applied to undergrad. And he's like, oh, 70% of my GSB class used a consultant when they applied. And I was like, oh, I guess I better figure out what this is. And it's just an incredibly competitive process, especially if you're shooting for the top programs. So having someone that knows what they're talking about and can kind of help you end to end. But there's just things that are you never would have thought about if you didn't have someone to help you when it comes to resume or recommendations or activities. And then of course, essays and other things. We also do a ton of GMAT as well. So if you want help with GMAT tutoring, we have some amazing GMAT tutors from all the top places. So yeah, if you want, book a call with the team. I'll also drop my Calendly link in. If you want to chat with me, I'm I'm happy to chat with anyone that's applying. Yeah, we're just excited to help you. This is one of my favorite emails I ever got, and it's actually fun because Andy is on this call. It was someone that was in consulting, got into HBS and said, John, thank you so much. I don't even know where to begin thanking you. Because of you and Leland and Andy, my life and my family's life has forever changed. And I don't know how to tell you how thankful I am. Pretty special. We honestly should print this out and put it on our office wall. But there are so many of these, and this is my goal for all of you. So I hope to be getting emails. You don't need to thank me, but definitely I hope you tell me that you got into a great school. I hope you can thank your coaches. Great. So let's jump into the meat, which is why you're all here. So there's obviously a lot that goes into an application process, and we're going to try to cover different parts of these. We will try to do that through a consulting lens. There will, of course, be some specific consulting questions, but want to make sure that we cover as much ground. We're not going to be able to go as deep into everything, but we'll cover as much ground as we possibly can, and then we'll do future sessions. We have MBA week coming up in a few weeks. That's all free, and you can go deeper on some of these topics. So we'll drop that link in the chat as well. I would be curious if you could share in the chat, as you think about the entire application process, GMAT, GRE, application strategy, rec letters, essays, resume, other things, interviews, what part of the process is most stressful to you as you look at this list of things? It's always interesting. Essays, app strategy. Okay, nice. Yeah, for me, it was recommendations. I was most nervous. I wanted to control the process, and that part of the process I couldn't control. But there is a lot you can do to control it, or at least influence it and guide it. And so, and set your recommenders up for success. That I think was super helpful. Yeah, the what matters most to you and why essay, letters of rec. All right, there's Jordan. Jordan is also on the letters of rec.
John, I don't know if I ever told you this, but my Stanford recommender literally submitted the recommendation 27 minutes before the app was due. There's literally no other thing that could have been more stressful than that. It was just like there was just like a chance that like there was a real, it was like legit.
Jeez, yeah. Give them a fake deadline a few weeks before so they remember. Now they'll see. But yeah, there's a lot. So let's jump in. I'll also I'll drop my Calendly link in the chat if you want to set up time. I'm happy to help you get matched to these coaches or any other coaches if you have questions. Let's just kick things off with a panel question that's a bit more general. Maybe Geri, will go to you to start on this one, but what's like your best tip for someone that's applying to these top programs, specifically as a consulting background?
Yep. So I'm sure most folks that are on this call kind of, right, that like most of these schools could fill an entire class with management consultants, all who have like top GPAs, came from the best schools, high test scores, great work experience, right? But we know that the schools can't do that. They can't fill their entire class with these wonderful consultants. And so I think it's really important to think about, as you start this process, certainly like things you were saying, essays are kind of definitely high on the list, right? But and letters of rec are things that you're worried about. But one of the things I think you really want to think about first is, how am I going to represent everything else about me outside of work? Because being a consultant, they know what you do, which is fantastic, actually. Like you don't have that burden of trying to explain, hey, here's what I do on a day-to-day basis. Here's what my company does, right? Oftentimes they kind of get it. So I think the thing that you do want to do is make sure, hey, I kind of have this thing going for me. Since they understand that side of me, what I need to really spend some time on is how do I showcase the other parts of me? What's going to make me really interesting outside of work? So making sure that people are spending enough time thinking about that, not just on like, hey, how do I represent myself in the resume? How do I tell my recs to talk about these projects? You want to also think about like, how else will I show that I belong at these schools? What are those reasons as well? And it's thinking through all the kinds of things. What other perspectives do I bring outside of my job? Is there something interesting about me, kind of where I grew up or where I'm from, or unique personality traits, what you give back to the community, what you bring to a group. All of those things are things you really want to spend time on as you go into this process, because that's the stuff that, you don't think about on a day-to-day basis, but those are the pieces that are going to be things that like are going to help pull you out of that pool. I'd say that's my biggest tip.
Yeah, that's really good. We'll dive a little bit deeper into that. Maybe Ben, anything you'd add, and then we'll go to Andy.
Yeah, I heard it. I think I heard it said it was Admit Weekend. I think I've maybe told this story before, but like on our way to like a taco place, one of the people who was like second year, he was like, I think the people who get in from traditional backgrounds, they've found a way to do those traditional backgrounds non-traditionally. And I think what that actually amounts to is being so deliberate and making an effort, obviously crushing your work. Like you have to do great. That'll trickle into recommendations. But in terms of like a narrative that you can write about, that you can get behind, and that somebody, when they read your essays, they can sum you up in a couple words because there's a through line between all your experiences. If you start that through line in your role as a consultant, I remember how competitive and crazy staffing was at McKinsey. It was wild, but I was so deliberate and I got creative in terms of finding ways to come up with ideas for projects. An idea I came up and pitched to a partner at McKinsey ended up being a project I ended up working on for the better part of a year. And that ended up being a huge component of how I was able to interview for the mayor's office, get that role, doing a similar thing. So it was a pretty cool, like that deliberation. It actually changed my career in the process. And then I looked back and I was like, what's the connective tissue? And it was that. So that's kind of how I think about it.
That's great. Andy, anything you'd add?
Yeah, I think they covered, Geri and Ben both covered pretty much what I was going to use for my introduction for all this. I think it's just, if you think about the applicant pool in general, yeah, there's a gigantic, very competitive pool of consultants. As Geri said, we need diversity, so we there's only so many they have room for. What this looks like to them is basically it's a pretty big pile of people who are actually generalists in their job in the first place. So it's kind of like a generic pile of generalists. And finding a way to stand out as a person with your story, as a consultant, doing certain things in a very distinctive way that make you stand out from other consultants, focusing on the kinds of things that you've been focusing on that other people haven't done, emphasizing the stuff that you have done that most people haven't. And then also trying to find any scrap of differentiation you can about what you're doing in terms of extracurriculars, community service. So finding every single way that you can stand out and just kind of ignoring the stuff that everybody else is doing in the same applicant pool, because they know that anyway. They know that as well as you do. So yeah, basically to second what Geri and Ben said.
Yeah, maybe then to Andy to go back to you in the same thread, like as you frame your aspirations in the Stanford essay or kind of your career goals in other essays, is it better to stay away from them being more generalist in nature? How do you think about framing there?
The career goals, what you want to do after your MBA is what you're
That's
asking.
right.
Okay, so do you want
Yeah.
to continue to be a consultant or so the thing is I don't think that there's a categorical bias against that. What I do find though is that the stories that resonate the best are the ones that have more focus and a more specific, fleshed out, kind of more fully colorized type of impact and means of engagement with the world that people want to make. I think if your long-term goal is you want to go back into consulting and just solve a little slices of problems all over the place and then leave before anyone actually implements a solution, rinse, repeat for the rest of your career. I don't think anyone would admit to having a bias against that. It's just I find that the story where like I've done that, I've built a great skill set, and now I want to focus it on this cause that I have, this mission, engaging with the world in a way that I feel like is for me. And then making my story about that just makes a better story, I think, and usually a better application.
Yeah. Geri, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think I agree. I mean, there's a rare person, I guess, who might say, yeah, I want to spend my career, I want to end up being a partner, I want to, or start my own consulting firm. Like that's reasonable. And I think if that's your path, then that's fair to talk about. I think you want to have a really good story around it, why that is, if that's the case. But I think for most people, it's okay to say, hey, I might return for a few years, but then you should also have, hey, after a few years, 10 years out, 15 years, here's really what I'm excited about. Here's what I'm passionate about. Here's where I want to make an impact. I think that part of your story is really important. So it's not that you can't talk about being there at some point, or going back, understandably, lots of people are doing that. But you also want to have that longer term plan in mind, just like Andy said, and kind of really show sort of an excitement around something, a passion for something. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe Ben, I'll go to you for this next one. Does it help to have some experience in something else before you apply, or can you, I mean, obviously you can apply directly from MBB or another top consulting firm. But like, how do you think about this as people are deciding, do I stay and apply from one of these firms, or do I go get experience somewhere else in private equity or in some sort of industry? What are your thoughts there?
I think like if I were to do like an average of people who don't leave versus people who do leave and do something else before, I would say in general, like it does raise your chances just from a statistical perspective, I would imagine, because you're likely accruing more and differentiated work experience by going somewhere else. And typically the people I think, I could be wrong, but the people that are applying straight from MBB, they haven't been there. They haven't had as many years on average of work experience because they haven't done literally multiple separate jobs. So odds are 2 jobs is bigger than 1. But I don't think you necessarily need to. And I think a lot of this goes back to being deliberate with your time. If you're going to be at a consulting firm and you're going to apply straight from the consulting firm, you better move within that consulting firm. Like different work, upgrade what you're doing, significantly accelerated trajectory, things like that. That's really how you're going to stand out. If you're just kind of super average at everything for a long period of time and you've only done one thing, that's not going to do it. So I think you can. And I know someone who got into GSB who I believe he was like, he moved quickly to AP, like really sharp guy, focused on a particular sector, and I had a narrative. And so I think that's what separates you if you want to stay. But I do think on average, like if you do a second experience, you'll probably have better chances.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've seen a lot of is, we have a coach on the platform that applied from BCG, but had a number of sports related experiences in his undergrad, and even on the side, that made it very clear that BCG was a place to really get a toolkit that was important to him, but that his long-term aspirations and impact was sports, and the extracurriculars sort of supported that. That's a good like kind of segue into, so whether you leave or whether you stay but get supporting experience, I think is an important discussion. Maybe we'll go to you, Andy. How do you think about extracurriculars, especially in like a demanding job like consulting? What should these candidates be thinking about, especially the ones that maybe have a year to think about it?
Right. So it's really hard when you're moving around in the first place, especially as a consultant. You're never even in the same place for that long a lot of the time. It's already hard for finance people who are working just crazy hours a week and living in the same city, but now you're floating all over the world in some cases. But I mean, the most competitive applicants that I've worked with who have best stories, like they do manage to find ways to do community service. And if you want to really have a competitive story, it's definitely good if you can do that as well. The most important kinds of it, it's not like running a 5K to raise money. It's not donating weight. So personal engagement, something that demonstrates your interpersonal style, your interpersonal skill set. Engaging directly with people in a way that influences them positively, helps them overcome obstacles, using your kind of doing empathy loops, figuring out why is this not working? Oh yeah, this is what's really going on in their heads. Based on that, this is a smart plan that I can come up with to approach this particular thing that I uncovered that they're struggling with, and then boom, step. Demonstrating that, and also if possible, initiative, leadership, and character. All in one ideal, almost impossible to find extracurricular activity. That would be the holy grail, I would say.
Yeah, that's great. Geri, anything else you'd add on extracurriculars?
Yeah, I mean, the only other thing for that holy grail that Andy was talking about, I would say, is like bonus points if you can connect it to your narrative, right? So something that's related to your long-term career plans, or something that's related to something you've already been involved in over time, right? So if you're involving yourself with sort of a nonprofit that's working to empower disadvantaged youth, let's say, and like that's connected to the impact you want to make in your career because you want to work in ed tech, and if you can kind of create that thread there, that makes it even more interesting and sort of makes your story and narrative more robust. So I would say that's one little additional piece, but you don't have to have all of those things. That's like the ideal, right? So if you can hit on some of those, between what I talked about and Andy talked about, I think that's great.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, this like theme of who are you, what's the impact you're going to have on the world, and why should the school care, because the world's going to care, and really kind of drawing those lines together through some of the work that you've done. I think that's really good. Okay, let's jump into some of like the actual sections of the application, and some of this will be more tactical, some of it will be higher level. We'll cover as much ground as we can. So let's talk about resumes. Obviously, some of you may have been, the last resume you put together was the resume you used to land your consulting job a few years ago. Maybe Ben, we'll go to you. How do you think about kind of leveling up a resume from something that you'd use to land a job in consulting, maybe specifically, versus something that the MBA, for the MBA program would be interested in?
Yeah, I think there's some meaningful overlaps I'd highlight too. I think like both resumes, like you want to quantify the things that you've done in some fashion. You want to index towards impact, less sometimes about process in the resume and more about like the so what, as everybody says. I think those are some important commonalities. But in terms of, I think like, in terms of like differences between, do you mean like just a consulting specific resume and an MBA resume? I feel like they're really similar. Maybe I'm crazy.
No, I think they are. I think consulting probably is a I guess a career path that is a bit more similar than what you'd get from like a finance, transact or like an engineering background. I think maybe the resumes that or some of the common mistakes that are both maybe for job resumes and MBA resumes. I think what we see is not doing that. So what? Not doing that up leveling to like why the CEO of Bain cared about this project. But like you kind of just talk about what you did. And I think kind of showing them, like in my HBS interview, they asked me, what would you do differently if you were leading Uber? And it was like, that shouldn't take you by surprise, right? If someone says like, if you were in charge of BCG, what would you do differently as a firm? You should know that. And so I think your resume kind of helps with that, right? It helps to communicate. I know why the work I do at the front lines matters to the CEO, because I could be in that position one day. But I think it's similar to, ideally you're doing that in your job recruiting as well. I think it's especially important. I don't know, Andy, is there anything else you'd add?
So I totally agree with what Ben said. Quantify things you've done, that's super important. Index towards impact, also super important. The things I like to focus on, starting with a good consulting resume and then turning it into the MBA version. Highlight interpersonal dimension of what everyone's been doing, because I think that's really important. Any bullet point that reads as if it could have been done, where we can imagine it being done by the applicant locked in a dark closet typing in their computer alone. Not what we want for business school, the most highly collaborative and social MBA degree program in the world. Positive outcome, as Ben said, we need to have a bullet should end with some kind of happy ending, even if it's not something that we have outcome for yet, or maybe the outcome was just you avoided a client making some terrible decision. That counts. That's important. That's significance. Also going above and beyond. A lot of times when you mention in a bullet that you did this thing, and your boss and maybe your next boss you're interviewing for your next job might say, oh, that's way beyond your job description. The outcome doesn't necessarily know that. And if you don't point that out, and I tell my clients, if you don't point that out to me, I'm not going to know it either. And that's terrible. Like whatever you're going beyond, that's gold. We have to have that there. We can't miss those things. So that's super important. And generally, I like to say, and this is maybe a little more radical, and most likely something you wouldn't have on a regular resume for a job. Given that the AdCom knows your job as well as you do, most likely, at least the kind of the middle, the main 60, 70, 80% of it. It's always good to just kind of leave out the part that every other consultant does and focus only on whatever specialization you picked up, whatever niche you found. You're the one who comes in and resolves the really tricky clients who no one wants to work with. Whatever niche you found, either an industry, relationship, the dynamic type, or whatever. Try to focus in only on that and leave out the stuff that they know about your job anyway.
Yeah, that's really good. 3 more things that I just jotted down that kind of made me think about. One is universities tend to care a little bit more about school involvement, like your university involvement, because they are a school, right? So you being involved in club leadership back in your undergrad might matter more to them than it matters to a consulting firm that is like, looking for you being good at your job. The other thing is, and Andy, you were really good about this with my resume, is selection criteria. So if you are in like a specific group or function that was hard to get into, helping them understand how hard that was to land that job. Like they care a lot about that because they want to know how you, stack up against your peers. And then the last thing I would say is like, maybe the personal side, well-roundedness. Like they like to see the human that's showing up on their campus, not just the consultant that's showing up on their campus. So maybe perhaps a little bit more of that, of kind of hinting at some of the problems you care about solving in the world. Those are maybe the other three things, but yeah, that's great.
I was just
Okay,
gonna,
let's go on.
I was going
Oh,
to say
Geri, go
quickly,
for it.
yeah, no problem. One other piece is I do feel like it is also a chance to show a little bit of personality. So I usually will ask people to put in an interest section. It doesn't have to be long, like literally a line or two, but there's some really fun things that people end up putting in there, and they really sort of like, get noticed. And then that gets asked about in an interview. Like it is a chance, to talk a little bit about sort of like some of the things you like to do in your free time, unrelated to work, just fun stuff. Some really cool things can be put in there. And so I think it's you should definitely take advantage of that.
Yeah, that's great. I like that a lot. Okay, let's talk about recommenders. We get a lot of questions, and you obviously do too, as coaches or consultants. How should I think about recommenders? Should they both be from my firm? Should I try to get an extracurricular to write one, or someone back from university days? Maybe we'll go back to you, Geri, on this.
Yeah.
How to think about like recommender selection, specifically as a consultant.
Yeah, I think, diversity of where the folks are coming from is less important than quality. So in terms of this question, you can, you can definitely get both of your recommenders from the same firm, unless you say, I have one equally as strong somewhere else. If you have one equally or stronger, for sure, somewhere else, then yes, do that. But if really your top two folks are coming from the same place, then go with those top two folks. And when I say top two, that really means it's because those folks know you really, really well. They know you on a personal level. They know you on a work level. They can talk about the kind of person you are. They can talk about what it's like to, sit next to you for hours a day, or what it's like to have you on a team and why people like you. Those are sort of the super important things. So I think that's, really the way to kind of initially think about who should those folks be. Yeah, that's at the top of the list.
Sorry. Yeah, that's great. That I totally agree. I think you have to go with the strength there. Maybe Ben, will go over to you. Like any other selection criteria of what you recommend clients as they're thinking about who to pick? Do they try to get the CEO of McKinsey to write their rec because their uncle knew him once, or like how should they think about selection criteria?
It's the biggest softball I've ever received. I mean, like proximity matters so much. That you need somebody who can like see you in multiple lights, ideally. So I think if you can have somebody who like has seen you like in a work context and like on a case or on a project, and they've also like sponsored you for an extracurricular or like been a big part of your your life in some other way, like that's great. Do not try to pull the move. That's like my biggest thing of like, oh yeah, they're just a senior partner. It's like literally like people have applied to these schools with like heads of state as like their recommenders. Like you're not gonna wow someone with like a partner. Like everybody can get those. You need somebody who can actually speak to your work and your quality and like your characteristics and who you are as an individual. If you're not doing that, then it's just not really it's not really going to be a good recommendation, I don't think.
Yeah. I think I completely agreed on proximity. Don't sacrifice that for anything, especially at a consulting firm where they know like even the lowest level consultants are actually pretty impressive. And so like getting an AP or someone that isn't necessarily super high up, they know that the caliber is high, and they know that they've seen what good looks like and can talk to that. So it's different when you're coming from like a nonprofit or you're coming from something else. Like they may wonder, can I trust this perspective, whatever. But if you're getting someone at a top consulting firm, LEK or McKinsey or BCG or whatever it is, like they're going to be credible. So focus less on that and more on them writing a table thumping letter. Maybe we'll go to you, Andy, on recommender prep. I feel like you did a really good job with me and with many of the others on Leland with preparing recommenders. Yeah, how do you recommend going after that?
So yeah, I mean, this is probably going to vary a lot depending on the applicant and the coach and the process that they use. My preferred approach is I like to think first about like what are the what are the core differentiators in a vacuum? Like, what are they? What do we have to work with? What are the things at any given that we want someone to say about how awesome this applicant is, given how incredibly important differentiation is, and given that we need to differentiate all these different things? Like, how are you great as a consultant in a way that's different from everybody else? How, like, what about your personal story? Granted, recommenders can't really write about that, but given that we want to focus on all these different things that you've been doing that's different from what everyone else is doing, thinking about that in a vacuum first, and just kind of going through that and making a list, I think is actually really important. And then figuring out, okay, who are the recommenders? What's the optimal choice? Our recommender team. And then based on their experience with the applicant, we want to try to think about who should we kind of allocate different points to based on what they've actually seen you do firsthand. We want to have some overlap, but not too much and not zero. Two people who know you really well should say some of the same things about you. It's weird if they didn't say any of the same things. But they shouldn't say all the same things about you, because then it looks like you told them what to say, which is really what we're not trying to do. We want them to run with it on their own and like breathe their own life into it, their own authenticity into it. That's what makes great recommendations great. They come to life, and the recommender brings them to life. So guiding them in the right direction, coming up with doing kind of the strategy stuff first, like what is there to allocate, and then who gets what, and with examples, of course, and then also making it a collaborative process. Sitting down with your the pack, with the recommender and saying, so this is what I think, super competitive process. This is what I think is going to help me stand out the most. But what do you think? Did I miss anything? Sometimes the things that leaving the door open for that, sometimes the things that they come up with are awesome ideas that we would never have thought of, because I just don't see the applicant that way. They don't see themselves that way. And sometimes they're awesome ideas. They become the concept for a Harvard essay. So you never know. So making it a collaborative process, and the beginning of that collaboration, not just the beginning and end, is the way I prefer to do it. I think that it tends to work well.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I know. Well, maybe we'll go to you, Geri, and then Ben on this one. I know, Ben, you've written like a 100-page doc on preparing recommenders, so you have a lot of thoughts on this. But Geri, maybe over to you on like what does a good recommendation accomplish? How does it fit into the broader application?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it can really serve to kind of reinforce your story and what you're saying about yourself, right? Because it's great. They're hearing from you in your essays, in your resume. And then it's like, okay, we have one point of view and now we have two others. So now, like, do these two others reinforce that same kind of story we started to build about, who this candidate is? So it's really, it really is important. And it's a chance for, I think, for those folks to talk about you in a way you can't talk about yourself, right? They can gush. They can go on and on about how wonderful you are. You can't quite do that in the same way in your essays and about yourself. So it's lovely that you get folks that are able to do that for you. And it then, I think like Andy was saying, it kind of brings it all really the color of like the kind of person you are and your personality and how people love working with you, and how you've made such a difference on a team. All of those things like really start to build out a human, right? Like outside of a resume, outside of your skills, it kind of it starts to really build a profile of what you might be like in that classroom and in that community. So yeah, they're hugely important.
That's great. Thank you, Ben. Maybe, yeah, if there's anything else that we missed on this, and there was a good question in the chat around like having limited exposure to specific people. I don't know if there's anything you'd touch on there, like specifically with consulting and how to navigate that or think about that.
Yeah, so I think first, just like on the recommender piece, like I just think it's super important to just like when you're like actually thinking about how to prepare them, like make this the simplest process in the world. Like their time is super valuable, and when you make them feel like their time's super valuable, like I think a lot more gets done a lot quickly and at higher quality. And I think it's not talked about enough, but like having all the dates in one place, having like the links all set up for them, so it's just very plug and play, and then they actually can feel I don't know, like they have the time and they want to spend the time. Then they're not bogged down with 8 hours of process. They'll be like, like how can I write a really great letter? How can I sit here and like do this for this person that I care about? That if you get them in the headspace, I think that's what comes from good process. So that's my tip there. John, I think on this question, like this is one of those questions where I would want very much to say, thinking about like limited exposure in a consulting environment, get continuity. If you don't have any continuity with anybody, that's tough. It's almost like the premises of the question are set up such that I can't give the answer that would get you into a business school. And the answer is have continuity, work with somebody, or try to deliberately work with somebody for an extended period of time if that's something you're looking for. Or when you're on a project and you care about it, do a killer job so that even if you only see that person for 3 months, they remember and they are, great, great reference internally and also are happy to be one externally. So that's my thoughts there.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's funny how like schools frame recommendations as like an evaluation, almost like it's a performance evaluation, which, of course, people in consulting are very used to writing. And that is not what you're asking them to do. Like if they think they are evaluating you, you've already failed. Like you are asking them to recommend you. And so the school will say, hey, tell us how Andy really is, or like, is Geri actually great, or like just like medium great? And you need to pick someone that like actually thinks that wants to pound the table for you. And so that really matters. And schools will try to trick you, which is smart on their part because they want that recommender to tell the truth, which ideally is the truth is something that the person is comfortable pounding the table and saying this person is excellent. All right, so we're gonna move on because we have about 15 minutes left. Let's talk about essays. There's a lot to cover with essays, and we're not going to even we're barely scratch the surface here. There are lots of other classes and events that we'll spend more time on these essays, but kind of if we were to try to bucket essays, the types of essays we see are sort of like the personal statement ones, which is tell us everything about you or what matters to you or anything else you want us to know. Those are, this is where like your narrative kind of comes through and shines through. Obviously a very, very difficult essay. We actually had someone in the chat that said this was that part that was most stressful to them. You'll also see the why this school, why us types of essays, why Stanford, or describe your aspirations and how Stanford will help you realize them. Why do you feel like Columbia or Wharton is a good fit for you specifically? Because these schools want people that want to go to their school. It's obviously really important to them. And every school you apply to should feel like that school is your number one. And then the last one is kind of the catch-all behavioral prompts or other types of essays that are, describe your the biggest commitment you've made or the time you've had a positive impact. Different schools will kind of insert things that matter to them they want to hear. So obviously lots of different types of essays. Maybe just to start, we'll go back to you, Geri. How do you think about like starting personal statement essays? This is obviously like if we were to think about kind of the core of your narrative. What does like a good personal statement essay look like? How do you recommend approaching it?
Yeah. And I think like this approach is sort of the same regardless of whether you're coming from consulting, unless others feel free to disagree. But I think there's a lot of overlap there. Like anyone who's writing those kinds of essays has to do the same kind of work, which is, that sort of self-reflection, introspection piece that we've kind of alluded to a little bit. And I think, each coach you work with has a slightly different way of going about this. There's different ways you can kind of uncover these things, but basically it's sort of asking you to do a little bit of thinking about like why you've made the decisions you've made in your life. What do you value? What, people are important to you? All these kinds of like thoughtful questions. Like I said, there's various sort of frameworks to help you go through this process. I have like a discovery doc that I ask people to fill out that like helps them kind of think through all these important points in their life. And then together we sort of come up with like, okay, where are the threads in those things, right? Like where do we see consistency? And we start to kind of build a narrative about the kind of, person you are and what matters and why that's connected to where you want to go in your career. And so I think the first piece, for those personal statements is certainly that like introspection piece, because, it's the part that people like doing the least most often, and they prefer to kind of oftentimes just jump right in and start writing. But that usually backfires. You kind of need to sit back for a minute first, do some of that work, thinking about your past and your future and where you want to go. And that's going to help you write a much stronger and better, narrative about yourself and personal essay.
Yeah, that's great. Andy, what do you recommend doing starting on these types of essays?
Building on what Geri was saying, I guess I think and being maybe a little more general. I think it's the whole story, almost the whole application is kind of a 3-part story. Past, present, future. And the past is everything that shaped you, everything, what your interests have always been. the skills you've always had, the things you've always liked to do, the ways you've always liked to use your brain, the way you've always liked to engage with people and help them in certain positive ways. That should feed into decisions you made about what took you into consulting, how you engage with clients, how you engage with teammates, how you mentor people who are maybe a little bit behind and help them catch up and be top performers and leaders, how you leave organizations and individuals better than you found them. And it should then that takes us into the present piece, and then that set of core differentiators at kind of who you are, the high watermark of your professional life right now, should kind of merge with your background and core principles and things that shaped you and inspired you into the future story, which is, where is this going from here? Where is it going post MBA? How do you want to engage with the world? What kind of impact do you want to make? What sense of meaning and purpose have you developed? And what kind of leader are you going to be? A big part of the goal question is not just what you want to do, what kind of job you want to have, but why the world needs you to do it. Who cares if if everybody wants a good job? Nobody's writing their business school goals essay about how they want to do something lame, right? Everyone wants a good job. That's awesome, right? So the question is, there's a lot of competition. Why should they care if you get it? And therefore, why should they give you their degree and why not somebody else who can get that job and do just as well? So tying all those things together, past, present, future, into a coherent story, that's what I think, for me, that's what gives me the overall cohesive story that ends up being the wow, and that really shows the human being behind all the different things they're looking at and trying to make data-driven decisions about.
Yeah, that's great. Ben, I think maybe just specifically the GSB essay, because I know this is something that you specialize in and love working. You've taught several classes on the GSB essay. Anything else you'd add on that one, or even the Why Stanford essay? But yeah, specifically, love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think my succinct summary of what these essays are is like, Stanford is what matters most to you. Like, what do you care about? Why do you care about it? And then why do you need Stanford, or why do you want to go to Stanford? How will Stanford accelerate your progress on that front? I think you guys touched on the vast majority of things in terms of the content, but what I will say, guys, I think maybe that's additive is there are, and I think someone said that everyone has their own process, but there are clear ways to kind of yank the ideas out and extract the things that are going to actually end up in your essays. So I think like the actual process, like I think definitely a couple of coaches do this. I love doing this. Is like an actual essay workshop, exposing you to varying styles, showing you different formulas that have worked from previous essays, and then getting you drafting, but drafting with like some tethering to reality of what a good essay looks like. There's a lot of really there's a really good set of processes that you can actually go through for this. So don't feel like you're scared to write these essays or whatever. So oftentimes just starting, but getting a little bit more targeted in your approach really is differentiating.
Yeah, that's great. It's kind of like you have to thread the needle between this being a very productive essay with also it not being like so boring or like a regurgitation of your resume. So like threading the needle on that, like storytelling plus being productive, not like a creative writing exercise. It's tricky, but yeah, definitely highly obviously like working with a coach to do this is incredibly helpful. Because there's like actual process and strategy here. Okay, so let's talk about we have two more questions here. We're right on time. What are the most common mistakes that maybe consultants tend to make? I know we've probably touched on some of them, which is not differentiating enough, but maybe I'll open it up to anyone on the panel. Any other common mistakes that specifically consultants you see consultants making in this process?
I find that there's, for some reason, kind of a natural resistance to really digging deep into personal, in some cases, kind of uncomfortable, maybe a little messy background aspects. One of my consultants, for some reason, when I think about all the times I've mentioned this and why this is important and why we need to dig deeper, it tends more often than not to be with a consultant. I have no idea why that would be the case, but a lot of, I've got one consultant, a McKinsey guy one time told me, like, I noticed the sample essays you sent me for Stanford, they all have everybody has some sob story, and he said, I don't really want to have a sob story, and I'm trying to convince, it's not really about having a sob story, it's more about just going into telling us about your personal life and in a way that really kind of conveys like who you are. and why you ended up where you are today, and like why you're good at these things. Like it doesn't have to be. It's really not sob stories. It's a strange way to put it, but being just really kind of digging into like the personal stuff and being vulnerable. I would say that tends to be something that a lot of my consulting clients tend to, not all of them, but maybe more than usual, tend to kind of avoid. And then also I think they also tend not to differentiate themselves and find their distinctive brand as consultants or as anything else, as well as they need to. I work with a lot of reapplicants, and that's what I see in their previous applications. They just didn't really sell themselves very well, in a way that really nailed down the distinctive, the relevant and distinctive value.
It's really good. Yeah, Geri, Ben, anything else you'd add? Okay, great. All right, any last tips? We're gonna wrap it up here. Also, we'll drop their profile links in the chat. Many of you have DM'd me asking for them again and started setting up intro calls. But any final tips, Geri? Maybe we'll go to you first, and then Ben, and then Andy can bring us home to these folks that are on this call.
Well, it's funny because Andy actually just stole mine. I was just about to say, like, don't be afraid to be vulnerable. Like, it is interesting. I think, maybe there is something about feeling like because the competition is so fierce that everything has to be super, super polished and I can't show any weakness. But in fact, actually that I think backfires. Not being able to show weakness is basically saying, I'm not able to be honest that I'm not perfect at everything. I don't know everything. I think they want to see that. They want to see that, like, you recognize, hey, here are some things I'm great at. Here's some things I'm not so great at. Or here's some times when things didn't go well. I think that makes you human. That makes you a real applicant, versus like just a person on a resume. And so I think it's, you can feel confident knowing that they like to see that vulnerability, that it adds to your dimension of who you are. So don't feel like everything has to be incredibly polished and everything has to be 100%. Your recs are going to take care of talking about you, like I said, and gushing and saying how amazing you are. So you yourself, you're able to kind of show some more of that side to you.
It's really good. Ben?
Yeah, my cheap answer is start early. Just start. Go begin the process, engage people, start like thinking about who your recs are, like start your essays, do everything as early as humanly possible, because that's the single biggest differentiator that I've seen in my time doing this, is the people who started early versus people who tried to cram it in. I think the more interesting answer though is that, especially in the essay writing process and kind of like waxing between like, where do I want to go with this narrative? Like, don't confuse darkness with depth. Like there's equally profound and interesting and powerful experiences that just so happen to be positive leaning. Like, you do not have to write something that is like, no one is requiring you to like dig into things that, it maybe like you shouldn't be digging into in your MBA application, or you haven't fully reconciled or figured out yet for yourself. But if you have a super powerful, profound experience that is positive, dude, that is equally viable and interesting and exciting. So remember to be funny, be like optimistic if that's who you are. So I just think a lot of people sort of look at the essay and go like, oh, do I just have to like talk about the saddest things in my life? Like, no, like that's not what this is.
It's great. Andy?
Yeah, 100%. What Ben said. There is such thing as oversharing, and we don't need to be. It's not a contest for who's had the worst, most horrible things happen to them in life, and the winner gets an acceptance letter. What Geri said is also right on. I think I guess kind of building on what everybody said, it's kind of because it's all I have left. I would say leaning into the truth. Usually, a lot of people ask me just like, well, tell me what they want to say. Like, tell me what they want to hear. What's the magic word? Like, give me the magic word, as if the bells, the siren's going to go off, and then the letter gets spit out when you say the code. Obviously, it's not how it works. And the thing is, you get to the honesty. These people do this for a living. They read probably, I don't know, 90 out of 100 of what they're reading is just really not very good, I think. And they're bored by it, and they read through all of that because the one, like the last 10 of those are great, and it's worth it. And the reason those are worth it is because they're true. The people who read contrived tactical stuff all day, where people are trying to work in the magic code, the secret answer, whatever it is they found online, they see them a mile away. They're awful. Like, they're so unengaging. They're so fake. And that's the last thing, especially Harvard, Stanford, especially Stanford. It's the last thing they want. The absolute opposite of what they want. Leading into the uncomfortable thing that happened that taught you why it's so important to encourage inclusion. The time when you couldn't help someone, that made you realize how important it is for you to help someone. The things that didn't go the way you wanted them to, but really are the real answers for why you do the things you do and the way you do them, and why you're so passionate about what you're passionate about. Those are really the best answers, and the real ones. And when you have those in your story, they just resonate. People just see truth in those, and it's unmistakable, and it's captivating. And I think so, leaning into the truth, let life be life, and just lean in that direction. That doesn't have to be towards the most embarrassing or depressing thing that ever happened to you, because like Ben said, that's not always what we want. But leaning into the real answer is usually what gives us the best answer.
It's awesome. I love that. Thank you all for these amazing insights. So helpful. I feel like I learned a lot. And I'm getting, lots of positive feedback. If you guys could drop some love in the chat for these panelists for being here on their Wednesday evening, that'd be great. Also, if you see that each of them has offered to do a discount code for those of you on this call. So when you're looking for a coach, you can get $250, $200, $100 off each of their larger packages. So definitely do that. Take advantage of that. They will fill up. I know many of you are already reaching out. We'll drop their profiles in, but yeah, thank you all, Andy, Ben, Geri. This has been so helpful. Really appreciate your time, and thanks for all the insight. And yeah, if you need help, definitely reach out to our team. We're happy to match you to a great coach. Definitely encourage you to reach out directly, but also here to help. I did drop my Calendly in the chat earlier, but you can talk with anyone on the team, and we're here to help you, and wish you all the best. Thanks for joining. Hopefully you join us for future events. We're wishing you all the best in this journey. It's very exciting, stressful, and we know you can do it. So thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.